David Cobb is one of the coordinators at the national level. The national level is a coalition of many organizations, and he has an interesting history. He was born in Texas, graduated from the University of Houston Law School, had a successful private practice in Houston for several years before devoting himself full-time to activism to achieve real democracy in the United States. In 2002, he ran for Attorney General of Texas. He did not win that office, but the Green Party in Texas grew dramatically during his campaign. And in 2004, he ran for President of the United States on the Green Party ticket. He has sued corporate polluters, lobbied elected officials, and has been arrested for nonviolent civil disobedience. He truly believes we must use all the tools in the toolbox to affect the systemic social change we so desperately need.
Thank you. So, now that we've settled in and people are not speaking, I can see that you're pointing to the microphone. It'll be very difficult for me to do what I'm doing, holding a handheld microphone. I will do that if that's what somebody needs. I've got this, I've got booming voice and acoustics, but if anybody really needs me to do that, then I'll do it, but it'll just be more difficult for me. So I'm just owning that and asking, is there anybody here who really needs me and are not, these acoustics and this amplification is too much? This is look, my grandfather was a Baptist preacher, so my voice tends to project. And in a room like this, I can carry it. But if anybody needs it, let me know. Fantastic. So, as Ruth said, my name is David Cobb. I like to consider myself a proud, a patriotic, and these days, friends, a pretty pissed off American citizen. Oh, good. I'm glad to get that kind of response because I'll also personally self-identify as a political progressive. And honestly, folks, I think that we progressives have made a mistake by allowing the Tea Party to claim some sort of monopoly on political anger. Right? Because I'm going to tell you something. I am angry about the racist, sexist, and class-oppressive world order that I'm living in. And I'm mostly angry about the fact that although I was told as a child that I was going to be living in liberty, justice, and equality, when I was told as a child that the United States of America was the great shining light on the hill, see, I believed that as a little boy. I was so proud to be an American whenever I thought that that's what this country was supposed to stand for, and I stand before you proud and patriotic still about those ideals, but pretty darn pissed off that I realized I've been lied to. Right? And I stand before you as a messenger for a growing movement of folks who are equally proud, who are equally patriotic, and who are equally pissed off. And I want to say something, friends. As the grandson of a Baptist preacher, what I know is this, that the anger I'm describing, that's righteous anger. Yeah. And righteous anger is a good thing if and only if you use it to propel you into action for justice, for fairness, for those changes. See, if you stay angry, you're just going to get old and bitter and cynical, and it's not any good place to be. Right? I don't believe that. I will tell you this. What I have found is that if you allow your righteous anger at the immorality of racism, sexism, classism, if you allow that to provoke you to action, that you will discover joy. You will actually find happiness because you are actually working in solidarity with other sisters and brothers who are actually inspiring us to better. And that, I think, is the human condition. And that's the reason I think that it's so important that we acknowledge that righteous anger does provoke us, but we don't stay in that place. Because let's be clear, righteous anger was behind the abolitionist movement. Those folks were angry at a depraved institution, and they did something about it. It was behind the Seneca Falls effort of women's suffrage. Righteous anger fueled the trade union movement and the civil rights movement. Righteous anger surely is a good thing, and it is only a good thing if and when we allow ourselves to act. And in the action itself, we will change the way we get. I'm going to ask folks if in the back, if y'all want to have conversation, totally understandable. But if you would, please step outside to have that conversation. We would all be greatly appreciative. My grandfather was a Baptist preacher. So, because I want to help to persuade you to join this movement, I'm going to definitely commit myself to giving you some information. But as I give this information, I want to share with you something that I knew intuitively as a successful trial lawyer, and now cognitive science is proving beyond a shadow of a doubt, and that's this. If you want to be persuasive, facts don't really matter that much. Take a moment. I did, because the first time I heard that, I thought, that's terrible. I mean, like so many of you, I have invested a lot of time and energy in learning facts, right? But then I came across the work of a fellow named George Lakoff, who's a cognitive scientist who, by studying the human brain and using scientific principles, proved beyond a shadow of a doubt that we don't actually make sense of the world through facts and logic. We literally make sense of the world through the stories we tell each other. And the stories that are told over and over again become the narrative. They become the vision. They become the frame for how we see the world. And what Lakoff has learned, and what I now know to be true, is that anytime you present new facts or new information to somebody, if you don't present it in light of their frame, how they see the world, that fact will at best go by them or bounce off of them. But more likely than not, they will actually reject what you say and anything else that you say, because you have not been willing to speak their language. You have not been willing to put yourself within their frame. So, because I want to be persuasive, and because I know that human beings understand the world through stories, I'm going to tell a story. Yeah? I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that these large transnational corporations are not just exercising power today. I'm going to tell a story on how it came to be that large transnational corporations are ruling us. As surely as masters once ruled slaves, as surely as kings once ruled subjects, unelected and unaccountable corporate CEOs are ruling us because they're making the decisions. Corporate CEOs already decided how much poison is going to be in the water in the public drinking supply of Asheville, North Carolina. Corporate CEOs have already decided how much poison will be in the air that we're all breathing right now. Corporate CEOs are deciding whether you get health care or not. Doesn't matter if you're sick or injured. It's a business decision that's being made by others. Corporate CEOs decided whether to take this country into war. And we, the people, we get to choose between Coke or Pepsi. We can choose between paper or plastic at the grocery store checkout line. We can choose between 17 different types of toothpaste. You think I'm joking? Next time you go down to the Piggly Wiggly or wherever it is that you do your shopping, go down that toothpaste aisle and actually count them. Think of me when you do it. See what you don't get 17 or more of them. See, the point is we are inundated with consumer choices in this society. Oh, provided you have the money to pay. That's also kind of important, because in this society, it doesn't matter what your needs are. It's only whether you can pay or not. But I'm going to go even deeper. See, let's assume that you could actually afford all the consumer choices that are given before you. Friends, please do not mistake a consumer choice with political power. See, political power would be the ability to participate in a meaningful way with how our society operates. And saying it that way, I think it's important to recognize the truism of what brings us all here today. And as I tell this story, I want to challenge you to challenge me. See if this is a story that only fits within the progressive frame, or is this a story that actually cuts across ideology? Is this a story that cuts across the typical two-party system? Is this a story that actually speaks to the best instincts and the best story of the American experience? And in fact, not just the American experience, because I'm going to really push the moment here and tell you that what I was taught as a little boy as American values of liberty, justice, and equality, friends, American school children do want liberty, justice, and equality, but not because we're Americans. We want and deserve those things because we're human beings. Right? You can applaud that. The point I'm making is that these are human values and these are human rights. And that's actually what we're at the cusp of today. So I'm going to tell that story, and as I tell this story, be asking yourself that question. And as I do tell the story, I'm going to cover 4 topics here today. The first topic is the word democracy. That word gets tossed around a lot in this country. So to make sure we've got some common agreement, let me ask, from what language does the word democracy derive? Greek. Very good. Demos means the people. Kratia means rule, literally. The word democracy, translated from the Attic Greek, means the people rule. That brings us to this pop quiz question. How many of y'all believe we the people are ruling in the United States? Don't be shy. Look around. This public library is full to the brim. Nobody's raising their hands. That's a problem. But saying it another way, friends, I think it's a good thing. What? Oh no, it's not a good thing that we the people don't rule. It's a good thing as I give this presentation all across the country, nobody raises their hands to that question anymore. I think it's a good thing that as a people, we are coming to terms with a scary but shameful reality that we the people are not ruling in the United States. In the Greek language, democracy means the people rule. In Greek, we don't have a democracy, we have a plutocracy. The rule by the wealthy elite. In fact, if we were really honest, we might have to make up another word, the kleptocracy. The rule by a thieving wealthy elite. Because they're stealing the commons from us that we hold in common together. They're stealing our labor and they're stealing our wealth from us. Right? That's actually what's happening. So I think it's a good thing that more and more people are being courageous enough to confront a scary reality that goes against the culturally sanctioned way of thinking, right? We're thinking the way the ruling elite have told us we're not supposed to think. And that, my friends, is the seeds of a movement. That's going to bring me to the next topic, which is sovereignty. If I had the word the sovereign on the board, who or what would you think? Quick, the sovereign. King. I bet everybody here thought king. That's because the word sovereignty just means the authority to rule. And 500 years ago, the sovereign was the king. The king was the sovereign. Those words were literally synonymous. And where did the king claim his authority to rule? God. Ruth, you don't get more legitimate. Right? To illustrate what I mean, I'm going to invite those of you willing to do it. We'll do a little exercise together. This exercise is always a lot of fun. For me. You'll see. I will invite those willing to do so to close your eyes for a moment and repeat after me. David Cobb is our king. Wow, a lot of y'all did it. I like this. I'm going to try. I'll try another one. Because David is God's representative on earth. Ooh, I do have some. Don't listen to them. And anything David says, I will obey without question.
And anything David says, I will obey without question.
Okay, so I got Kenneth. And I appreciate your kindness to me, Kenneth. But I'll tell you this, friends. That was where I would normally say, open your eyes. But to your credit, Asheville, nobody's eyes are closed. Yeah, good on you. I will say the person who started that little spattering of applause is the same person who shook her head no whenever I asked. But I will say this. What y'all did was, as soon as you realized what I was asking you to say, you all did what every group does. You all kind of laughed at me. Did you notice that? Even though you were willing to go along with it, you were kind of snickering and laughing. And the reason you laughed, of course, is because it's funny. And not funny like, oh, what a witty comment David made, funny. But any comedian would tell you, David, that's a cheap laugh. Like, you made them say something absurd, so of course they laughed at it. I mean, the idea that I could tell Ruth how to live her life because who my daddy is, that's silly, right? Or even better, that I get to tell all of you, in fact, how all of society will be organized politically and economically because of the divine right of kings. Of course you laughed at that. That's ridiculous. That's absurd. And yet 500 years ago, friends, people just like you and me, we not only said it, but we believed it. See, I want to point out that the question of sovereignty, the question not of just who has the authority to rule, but deeper, what are the mechanisms for making and implementing decisions about society, that might be one of the most important decisions that any group of human beings ever make for themselves. And as Ruth said in the introductory remarks, I'm a Green Party member and I'm proud of that. But I'm equally proud to tell you I frequently work in coalition with Democrats when I can find common ground on issues. But I'll go even further, friends. I've got a history of working in coalition with Republicans and Libertarians when I can find common ground, right? And I will tell you this. In fights around the Patriot Act and the NDAA and the NAFTA and the Trans-Pacific Partnership, it's often Libertarians and Republicans I'm working with. And even further, I have a history of working in coalition with anarchists and socialists and communists if I can find common ground on an issue to work with. See, I don't say that so you'll pat me on the head about what a good boy I am. I say it so you'll fully appreciate what I mean when I say, in my 25 years of social change work, looking for coalition partners, I've never had the privilege or the opportunity to work in coalition with a monarchist. I can't find any. And 500 years ago, at least in Europe, that's all there were. And 500 years, that's a blink of an eye in human history. So when people tell me, oh, you can't amend the Constitution, that's too hard, I think, have you not been paying attention? I mean, throughout all of world history, and frankly, especially throughout U.S. history, profound changes have been made. And I don't just mean between one administration or another, one political party or another. I don't even mean just one law to another. I mean changes in the power dynamics. I mean cultural shifts have occurred. And here comes something almost metaphysical, but it's so important, and that's this. If enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it's true. That's actually how reality operates. So if it is true that these huge transnational corporations are basically destroying the planet that we depend upon for life itself, and Abram, that is true. And if it is true that a racist, sexist, and class oppressive world order is being created with the plunder and rape of our Mother Earth, and that is also true. If these things are true, then perhaps we should start thinking and acting differently than we have been in recent times. Maybe we should start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis. You know why I think we should start thinking and acting like we're in a crisis? Because we're in a crisis. Right? We got to actually tell the truth about this historic moment, and that is that this is not just a crisis, it's actually a series of crises. There's an ecological crisis that's barreling down on us. We're in it now, by the way. It's an economic crisis, and may I say, capitalism can't solve this crisis as an economic system. Actually, hold on to your hats, capitalism is the crisis.
Yeah. Right.
Talk about unsanctioned thought and speech from the ruling elite, but that's the reality, because within the seeds of capitalism, which assumes unlimited growth forever in a finite planet, friends, that's the ideology of cancer. Right? I simply cannot. Put aside whether you think it's fair or good or unfair and bad. Put away the normative philosophical impacts of any economic system that assumes that resources are unlimited and can be utilized and exploited forever and assumes that there will be unlimited markets. That is just flat ass wrong. right? It cannot work. So this is an economic crisis that cannot be solved by the way we're currently thinking. But it's not just that, it is indeed a social justice crisis as well. Because when you have the richest country in the world allowing 20 to 25% of its children to go to bed hungry or undernourished, there's nothing else but to call that but a moral crisis, right? You can applaud that if you like. When you have a justice system, a criminal justice system that finds its way clear to lock up more adults than any other industrialized country in the world per capita, and then all you have to do, you don't even have to squint your eyes. You just have to be willing to look at that reality to see that it's mostly poor people of color who are being incarcerated at these rates, and you see that we have created a prison industrial complex, a school-to-prison pipeline system that is preying upon poor white kids and kids of color in order to continue to make profits. And my friends, I'm just going to tell the truth as I see it, right? And we'll have a discussion period, and I'll invite anybody who feels like that's not the truth as you see it to engage with me. But as I'm telling this story, again, I'm going to do my best to tell the story with integrity. So these crises are coming together, but I also don't want you to get too upset about that, because I hasten to remind you that in the Chinese language, where they use symbols for words, the symbol for crisis is also the symbol for another word. Opportunity. Folks, and also what else I learned recently? It also is danger. So crisis, danger, and opportunity are all for them the same basic concept. So as scary as this might be, this moment, and there's all reasons to be scary, it's also a call to inspiration and a call to hope, to imagine that we might be part of a transition, a transformation that will equal or even surpass the abolition of slavery or women's suffrage or abolishing Jim Crow. Imagine for a moment living in the society that almost all of us want, regardless of party labels, regardless of ideology, a world based on love and compassion and fairness and justice. I've never talked to anybody in any political party, in any ideology, that if I can't get down to some human conversation with them, but what we don't agree, that love is better than hate, that compassion and tolerance is better than intolerance, that sharing is better than being greedy. You know what? When I was a little boy, I remember my mama coming. Me and my brother and my cousin Joe Michael, we were fussing and fighting over a little Hot Wheels car. I know, boys and cars. I don't know what that's about, but anyway, we were yelling at each other and we were fighting. And I'll never forget Mama coming down. And you know what? She didn't lord over us. Mama got down on her knees like this and put her hands on us and calmed us down first. Kind of an important thing that mothers know how to do. Calmed us down and then just rationally and calmly explained, look, there's 3 of you. Let's count. We've learned how to count. 1, 2, 3. But there's only one of these. So you can either share this one or look around at all the toys I've seen y'all play with before. And I grew up in poverty. We still had some toys to play with. Look at all this. And all she said was, son, you're going to have to share. And you know what? It made sense to me. It made sense to me then, and it makes sense to me now. There's enough to go around, folks. All we have to do is learn how to share what God or the goddess or the natural world, however you look at reality itself, what has been provided to us is plenty to go around if we will actually just learn how to share with one another. And that's what I learned in kindergarten. Yeah. Democracy. Sovereignty. The next topic, legal personhood. Please note that I did not write corporate personhood on the board. That's because legal personhood under law just means the ability to assert rights. And since we're talking about legal personhood, we mean the ability to assert your rights under law. And saying it that way, I hope it's obvious. This is not just a legal technicality. The ability to assert rights, and specifically who has the ability to assert rights, that's been at the very core of every struggle and fight in the United States of America. Every social movement at its core is about do you get to be a person with legal rights? The last topic on the board is the corporation. Because I think that word is also important. Let me ask, from what language does this derive? Latin. Corpus means body. And the suffix tion means to have or create body. And by body, I mean literally physical body. That's because, body. That's because in law school we are taught, and by the way, are there any lawyers in this crowd besides me that would admit it? Oh my goodness! Now there's a brother at the bar from Houston, Texas. Steve Agad, it's good to see you, brother. All right, so Steve, and I saw another one who, this lawyer right here did it like this. But I saw you. So my two brothers at the bar, and there's probably somebody else in this crowd who wouldn't raise their hands, but do y'all remember being taught that a corporation is a legal fiction? Yes. Right? Honestly, y'all, every lawyer I've ever asked, that's ingrained in us. We're really taught that. And watch this. Even those of you who were not suffering from being exposed to 3 years of law school and subjected to that, if you've heard that phrase, even if you couldn't precisely define it, if you've heard that a corporation is a legal fiction, raise your hand. Really. All those hands go up, right? So if a corporation is legal fiction, if a corporation is a legal fiction, friends, that begs the question, what does the word fiction mean? Made up, not true. In law school, my corporations professor, she stood before us and said, you have to understand that a corporation doesn't actually exist in the physical material world. Parenthetically, I understand that to be reality. A corporation doesn't really exist, she says, but in this class we're going to pretend like this group of people and the resources that they acquire and assemble and the contractual obligations that they make and the cultural assumptions under society, we're going to pretend like this very complex concept is actually one thing so that we can treat it a certain way under law. And remember, if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, poof, you have just come across something really important. It sounds metaphysical, but it's really important. Under law, a corporation only exists if it is allowed to exist through both society and the legal system itself. A corporation is only what the law says it is, nothing more. And the word corporation comes from Latin because the first corporations ever created, as we would understand those entities, was created during the Roman Republic. Not, by the way, during the Roman Empire. And sometimes I wish we'd spend more time asking, hey, what happens when a republic devolves into an empire? That might be an important conversation in the United States. Just planting seeds. But I will say this, those Romans, they created the corporation for a reason. Y'all heard the phrase, or better yet said, all roads lead to Rome? 2,000 years later, we still say that, right? That road system was built and operated as a corporation. Likewise, the aqueduct system that moved water all across the Italian peninsula without electricity. Folks, one of the reasons I continue to have such optimism, real optimism about our ability to make change, is I know how clever humans are. I mean, that aqueduct system was an amazing engineering feat. And it was also conceived, built, and operated as a corporation. Likewise, the first universities, the first hospitals, can y'all guess? Corporation. So here's my next pop quiz. What does a road system, a water system, a university, a hospital, what do they all have in common?
Public service.
Public service. Sir, everything that I just listed was a public service or a public good, and at its core, the original concept of a corporation is to create a mechanism to allow private money, material and resources to be assembled to put to a public good. Saying it that way, I hope it's clear that neither David Cobb or the Move to Amend Coalition, we are not anti-corporation. Corporations are tools that can be put to good use. And folks, they really are nothing more than tools. Conceptually, they're tools. And now, sir, what's your first name?
Daryl.
Daryl? May I use you as an example, Daryl? As a matter of thinking, I want y'all to imagine for a moment that Daryl is a houseless individual. But good for you, Daryl, but that standing before you is a skilled carpenter with tool and hammer in hand. And I'm building a house for you to live in. And it's a sturdy house. It's a well-built house. Is that hammer good or bad? Well, it's good, right? Here I go, hard at work, putting human effort into building a house for my brother Daryl, for him to be able to have some shelter in. Now, Daryl, I want you to imagine that standing before you is a fellow with a hammer, but bad news for you, my intention is to bash your skull in. Now, is that hammer good or bad?
The same hammer.
It's a trick question, isn't it? The hammer is neither good nor bad. A corporation, by definition, is neither good nor bad. A tool is either appropriately used or inappropriately used. My point is that in today's society and culture, we know that the legal system is allowing the corporation to be inappropriately used. And I'm going to go even deeper and tell you that the modern transnational corporation doesn't exactly operate along that public model, does it? That's because the modern transnational corporation, the big mega corporations, those entities have their birth in the 14th and 15th century of Europe. The age of discovery. I have to put discovery in my imaginary quotation marks because, after all, what did the Europeans discover in the 14th and 15th century? Well, Africa, Asia, later North and South America. Newsflash, there were people living there. They weren't lost. They weren't discovered. And so with the same spirit of courage, let's tell the truth, and it's an ugly truth. The 14th and 15th century of Europe wasn't the age of discovery at all. It was the age of rape and pillage and plunder and murder. For me, there's one word that kind of sums it up. It was empire. See, European imperialism of the 14th and 15th century was the time period where the modern transnational corporation was birthed. They were called joint stock companies originally. And get this, they weren't just accidentally created during the age of empire. The joint stock company, or the modern corporation, was created as an intentional, deliberate instrument or tool of empire. One of those early corporations was called the East India Company. You've heard of it. Literally designed to facilitate the military conquering of an entire subcontinent. And not only that, but to destroy the existing civilization that existed there and to force those people to work and labor to steal the resources of their own land so that that resource could be sent as profit for the shareholders of the East India Company. It was a business model based on racist imperialism. And another early joint stock company was called the Africa Trading Company. Anybody want to guess what the Africa Trading Company traded? Folks, I'm going to use myself as an example because I think this is very important. I don't think that white people are honest enough about race in this country, and we don't actually initiate conversations about race often enough. And in light of the Zimmerman verdict, I think I'm going to take advantage of actually myself and say, if I'm asked the question, what did the Africa Trading Company trade, and I'm asked it that way, the word that does pop in my mind is slaves. After all, I was reared in this country. I went to school in this country. I was taught about the horrors of the transatlantic slave trade. I was taught about Harriet Tubman and Sojourner Truth and how wonderful it was that they rose up as runaway slaves to actually fight that system. But now that I've made such a big deal about that word, let me ask this. In the 14th and 15th century, would we say that just by definition Africa was populated by slaves? No, we would say Africa was populated by Africans. I like that word better. Say it loud.
Human beings.
Human beings. Africa was just populated by people, y'all. And now I'm going to push myself and say this with some trepidation, but with conviction. Y'all, Africa was populated by people who were basically just like me. And I say that with some trepidation because I know I'm white. I'm not stupid. But I say it with conviction because if you ask any scientist, if you ask any biologist, they will tell you that notwithstanding what my culture has taught me, that race is an illusion. It doesn't actually exist in the physical world. That is what they will teach you. That is the truth of it. And so if race doesn't exist, how does racism exist? Answer, because if enough people think that something is true, if enough people act like it's true, it becomes true. And the point that I'm making here, friends, is to force us to come to terms with the reality. that the notions of corporatism, imperialism, and racism are inextricably linked. And what links them? Exploitation and oppression. And at the end of the day, if we're actually going to recreate a world based on love and compassion and sharing and all the virtues that we were taught as children were actually virtuous, we're going to have to let go of political, social, and economic institutions that are based on exploitation and oppression. That's just how I see it. Thank you. Now, I want to remind you that we're telling a story. And in this story, I want to make it a specifically American story and ask, how many colonies in the founding of the United States of America? 13. Y'all, that's a gimme, right? Everybody knows. How many? 13. Since that was so easy, here comes the trick question. How many of those colonies were actually corporations? Answer? All of them. All of them in this sense. If the word corporation means to have or create body, it took the king to give body to each one of them. And the king created each one by the use of a very specific legal instrument. Anybody know the legal instrument I'm talking about? Nicely done. It's a corporate charter. And now I will do a little exercise to illustrate how the king creates a corporation. And in this exercise, I'll be the king. Why do y'all think I get to be the king in this exercise? That's right, because I'm telling the story. Every good lawyer knows the importance of controlling the story, right? So I'm telling the story. What that also tells us, folks, is that stories matter, and who's telling the story matters. And we should think about that. But in this little story, this little exercise, I'll be the king, and I'm going to create Massachusetts. Now, I'm not going to bother with administering Massachusetts on the day-to-day, so instead I will create a legal title, a new legal position called a royal governor. And so I create Massachusetts and assign this new legal entity, the royal governor, with the legal responsibility, and this is a quote from the actual charter that created Massachusetts, the royal governor has the legal responsibility to plant, to rule, and to govern this new entity on behalf of me the king, to benefit me the king, but also to benefit the other shareholders of the joint stock company known as the Massachusetts Bay Trading Company. Massachusetts began as a for-profit corporation on the same business model as the East India Company. In fact, Georgia was a penal corporation. In fact, Virginia began as the Virginia Company. A couple of these corporate charters were actually land grants, but at their core, it took a corporate charter to create every one of them, and a royal governor assigned to govern them. So in today's terminology, for the royal governor of a joint stock company now known as a corporation, we wouldn't call them a royal governor. What word would we use to describe them? A CEO. Friends, the point I'm making is to challenge us to an incredible awareness that the American Revolution was not merely a rejection of monarchy as a form of rule. It was that, to be sure, and it wasn't merely a call for no taxation without representation. That was actually a very minor complaint if you look at the Declaration of Independence or the Boston Tea Party. Because after all, in the Boston Tea Party, did they throw all the tea in the harbor that night? They targeted one tea, didn't they? East India Company tea was the only tea that went in the harbor that night. Actually, the Boston Tea Party was an act of nonviolent civil disobedience targeting corporate property that resulted in over $1 million worth of property destruction. I sometimes wish the modern Tea Party folks would actually do a little history and recognize what they're literally celebrating, right? That's actually what it was their complaint about the East India Company's control over the British government. You know what percentage of the English Parliament who were passing the Stamp Act, the Navigation Act, and all the acts that actually provoked those white settlers to rise up? You know what percentage of those members of Parliament owned shares in the East India Company? 100%. Every one of them, the fusion there was explicit. Now, my friends, I'm happy to remind you that in the American Revolution, the revolutionaries won. And so a new charter gets written, a new charter to describe how the political system is supposed to operate. It's also known as the supreme law of the land. What's that charter called? The U.S. Constitution. How many of y'all have read the Constitution? Oh, good. A lot of hands go up. Steve, did I see you raise your hand? All right. Just checking. So when you read that document in its entirety, you'll see two actors at play. The first actor is the most important actor. In fact, it's so important it's the first three words. We the people. Those are hallowed words in this country, and they should be. See, we the people come together to create the second actor, which is government itself. Saying it this way, we the people create government. Government is dependent upon us. In this document, we the people are understood and described as free and sovereign. What does the word sovereign mean again? The authority to rule. See, the king isn't sovereign. We kicked his butt out. But the government isn't sovereign over us either. Actually, government is subordinate and accountable. Government is subordinate to whom? The people. Government is accountable to whom? The people. That's got a ring to it, doesn't it? I like how this is going. Let's continue. We the people are free and sovereign because we the people have rights. Government does not have rights. Government only has duties. And as a lawyer, let me stop for a moment to underscore the difference between rights and duties is profound. If I or if you have a right to do something, we don't need anybody's permission. We don't need the city council's permission. We don't need this group's permission. We don't need the North Carolina State Legislature's permission. Thank goodness with your crazy-ass legislature right now. Point I'm making, friends, is that if you have a constitutional right to do something, it means you can do it, and government cannot appropriately, legitimately infringe upon your rights. That's a super important idea in the United States idea of how our government works. Government never has rights over the people. Government only has duties to the people. And where do those governmental duties come from? Well, remember, all power resides with the people. And the idea of the people having all the power, actually, it predates the United States. It goes to John Locke and other philosophers. But Thomas Jefferson said it well when he said, no government is legitimate if it does not have the consent of the governed, because the governed are the source of all political power. That brings me to this pop quiz question. What's the population, more or less, of Asheville, North Carolina? 75,000, more or less. So I will celebrate that 75,000 folks have all the political power here. But I'll tell you this, I don't want to go to a meeting of 75,000 souls where we decide where should stop signs go. And I like political meetings. I am not going to that one. Now tell me how many in the county. 250,000? You want to go to that meeting where you make countywide decisions? About 7 million North Carolinians in the state. You want to go to a meeting of 7 million of you and like hash this out? Of course not. See, in our framework, we the people do have all the power, but we wisely delegate some of our power to government. Do we delegate all our power to government? Heck no! We only delegate enough power for government to perform the duties that we have told them to make. That's what the concept of limited government even means, by the way. That government is limited in its power to perform the duties that we have told them to perform. And how does government perform those duties? They write laws to reflect public policy. And friends, I want to stop for a moment and acknowledge that there's going to be debate about what those public policies should be. Obviously. And that's as it should be. But friends, I feel rather young at the age of 50 to play the I remember when game. But I remember when you could have fierce political debate with somebody and still be respectful and civil to them. I remember my daddy getting into a fussing match. It wasn't the only one with Mr. Barry. He was our neighbor. Not our next door neighbor, because I grew up in rural Texas, and like many of y'all, I bet, your neighbors were or are adjacent property owners, right? And Mr. Barry was our adjacent property owner, and I remember Daddy and him getting into a fussing match one day around elections and such. And the temperatures were rising, and it was getting scary as a little kid, and I thought they were about to fight, and I was very nervous, and I was very scared, and the next thing I know, they're laughing and cutting up, and Daddy is shaking Mr. Barry's hands, and he says, "You loon, I'll see you at the feed store," the game or whatever. And as a little kid, I went, "What happened?" How in the world did that happen? As an adult, I think I know what happened. I think what happened was, and I wish I could say my daddy did it, but I don't know who did it, but I know that both of them quickly got on board with the idea that you're my neighbor. My kids play with your kids. Next hurricane, we're going to need each other. You watch my property when I'm not around. I watch yours when you're not around. See, whatever their disagreement was, they saw that their humanity, that being in relationship with one another as neighbors was more important. Now let me tell you folks, these were redneck Texas white folk. They were not saying, "I'm in human relationship with you." But that's what they meant, right? That's what was motivating them, which is to say they were seeing their humanity in one another, and that was more important than whatever their political struggle was. So I'm not saying don't engage in political struggle. I'm not saying don't engage in political fights. I'm saying fight fair. Engage in that struggle knowing that the person that you're engaged in that struggle with is also a human being who actually deserves respect and civility from you, and at the very least, they're entitled to be just flat-ass wrong. And if we actually, right? If we will actually have the courage of our convictions and our morality, but then still see the humanity in people with whom we disagree, I think that's something very important. And the other thing I want to remind you is that these public policies, whether I agree or disagree with any public policy, I hope we remember that our rights are not subject to the political process, which is to say, the one thing that no public law can ever do is to violate the private rights of the people who live in that jurisdiction. And now that I've taken the time to sketch this out, I'm going to tell you in one sentence how the U.S. constitutional framework is supposed to operate. Now, it's a run-on sentence, but it's still one sentence. Watch this. In the United States Constitution, we the people are free and sovereign because we the people hold all the political power. But we wisely delegate a certain amount of our power to government. Government which will always be subordinate and accountable to we the people. And we will charge government with the duties of writing laws in the public interest. And those public laws are the public policy, but the one thing that no public policy or public law can ever legitimately do is to violate the private civil rights of the free and sovereign people who live there. Ta-da! I mean, isn't this beautiful? Isn't this wonderful? We should try that in this country. This would work. And I'm not joking. This is beautiful. And I'm also not joking that we've never tried it. Because before I go one step further waxing poetic about the brilliance of the U.S. Constitution, I have to ask for a quick timeout so somebody can tell me in what year is the Constitution ratified? What year does it become the supreme law of the land? Nicely done. A very educated crowd. 1789. 1787, that I also heard, that's the Constitutional Convention. But 89 is the ratification year. The reason I want 1789 on the board is to say, now that we know that legal personhood is the ability to assert rights, who gets to be a part of we the people? What are their characteristics in 1789? White. So let's start there. That's kind of important. Oh, white landowner. Oh, man. So you got to be white, you got to be a man, and you got to be a landowner. That's a lot of restrictions. Y'all remember to hold these fools in love as we educate them? You on dangerous ice back there, buddy. I trust you know some of these people who will come to your defense. Listen, y'all, the point I'm making is there's nothing wrong with this framework at all. In fact, this is a beautiful framework. Of course, as little children, we revere it because it's so beautiful. And it's only when we become older are we exposed to the shameful reality, that most human beings weren't considered legal persons. The indigenous human beings who lived here were subject to intentional deliberate genocide under this document. The Africans who were brought at the barrel of a gun and forced to build this country with slave labor were done so under the auspices of this document. Women were not allowed to own property. Women were property by any reasonable understanding of that word under the auspices of this document as interpreted. And most of the white men, by the way, weren't legal persons either. Because I know you were just joking and all, but for all the hooting and hollering, most of the white men in 1789 were either indentured servants themselves or at best second-class citizens. You know what percentage of the adult human beings living in 1789 in the newly formed United States of America were actually legally persons? 12%? 1%. Somebody's got the 99% meme, the 1%. Sir, don't be so cynical. It's not 1%, it's 5%. Folks, think about that for a moment. That also means, of course, that 95% of the souls living in this newly formed United States of America were not fully legal persons. I like how Howard Zinn summed it up, and may the goddess rest his soul. Howard Zinn said the entire history of the United States has been a series of struggles by actual human beings to be able to be defined as persons with rights under this Constitution. That one sentence is so important because it sums up what legal personhood means and why it's so important. And so now that we've taken the time to go through this framework, it might behoove us to say, well, where should the corporation go on our little document? After all, it's the most important, the most ubiquitous, the most powerful institution today, the huge transnational corporation. But before I put the corporation on the board and where, I will ask this question. Somebody tell me what it takes to form a corporation under North Carolina law today. A very trivial fee. Actually, I think it's about $125. Now, you have to fill the paperwork out correctly, dot the I's and cross the T's, identify a president and a treasurer. It's really actually not difficult. And as long as you fill that form out correctly and your check clears, the Secretary of State will rubber stamp that document and issue you what? A charter. How long can your corporate charter last in North Carolina? Forever. The 1 year is how long it is before the next filing fee. But anybody who pays it, so he can actually live forever, Kenneth. And get this. You know what you can do with a corporate charter under North Carolina law today? Anything legally permissible. That's what the code says. Apparently, if you have enough wealth and power, you can do all kinds of illegal things. But put that aside for a moment. I'm just pointing out that we all know that the huge corporation is the most dominant institution in our lives today, and almost none of us even know the history of where it comes from or why. It's because, friends, the ruling elite don't want us to have an understanding about how power actually operates and how these instruments that are actually influencing and shaping our lives and our very culture operates. Part of what I'm doing in this short 55 minutes is exposing the birth of the corporation. And get this, that's not how it always was. Because I'm going to take you back to 1789 now in this state and in every state in the Union and tell you what it once took to form a corporation in North Carolina, in every other state, and this was true for roughly the next 100 years. First, your application did not go to a trivial clerk. Your application went directly to the State House of Representatives, where they debated it, discussed it, and voted on it, and you had to get a majority vote. But that majority vote in the State House is not enough, because now your application goes to the State Senate, where they discuss it, debate it, and vote on it, and you got to get another majority vote. And that's still not good enough, because now your application goes to the governor, who considers it and has to be willing to sign it. Does that sound anything like a corporate charter today? Of course not. What did I just describe? A law. The point I'm making is, and wait for it, the founders' original intent of the corporation and how it should be formed was the functional equivalent of a law. It was a political process to allow the privilege of limited liability incorporation. And if you were granted that privilege, all you could do is the specific thing that your corporate charter had been asked. In fact, this is first year law school. Do you remember what it's called if back then if a corporation did any other type of business other than the specific thing they were told to do? Ultra vires. Nicely done, Steve Agan. It means beyond the authority. which is to say the state government stepped in and said, you're going beyond the authority of why we have granted you the privilege of limited liability. Oh, and by the way, that limited liability privilege was usually only good for 1, 3, 5, 7 years. The longest corporate charter ever issued was 20 years. The basic lifespan of an adult human being who would be doing business. And get this, friends, if anybody at the end of that time period, even if you were doing the specific thing you were supposed to do, the corporate charter dissolved on its own terms. And if you wanted to continue to do the business was still there, but the limited liability provision evaporated. And if you wanted limited liability, you had to reapply all over again. And get this, even if you're in that limited time period, even if you're doing the specific thing for which you had been granted a corporate charter, if you ever did anything to be seen against the public interest, do you know what happened to your corporate charter? Revoked. Corporate charters were once routinely revoked in this country for merely acting outside the public interest. Which brings me to this question. Can somebody name a single one of the Fortune 500 corporations that would even be allowed to exist if we had the restrictions that the founding fathers put on corporations? I'll wait. The point is, look, there are tens of thousands of small and mid-sized corporations and businesses that could still exist, but these huge transnational corporations couldn't even exist today if we had the same political restrictions that the founders put on these instruments, these tools. And remember, I'm not saying 1789 was the land of milk and honey. Slavery existed. The systemic patriarchy against women was real. Working class white men were being oppressed. But what I'm saying is the tool known as the corporation was politically controlled. And now, friends, that we have made it clear that it takes an action of state government to form the corporate charter. We understand that the corporate charter can be used to hold the corporation subordinate and accountable. We understand that the corporate charter describes the duties of why a corporation should even be allowed to exist. And we understand we should not allow a corporation to exist with limited liability if it violates the public trust. Isn't it just plain as the nose on your face that a corporation should go here so that it can be properly politically controlled as it once was for over 100 years in this country? And now, friends, thank you for your patience, because here comes the punchline. When the United States Supreme Court comes waltzing in an act of supreme judicial activism, by the way, and says, oh no, notwithstanding logic and law and every other thing, we're going to instruct you. 5 of us are going to instruct the entire society and culture that you have to treat this artificial entity as if it's a person with inherent rights. It perverts the whole thing. See, corporate personhood is a shorthand for the illegitimate, court-created idea that a corporation must be treated as a person with inherent unalienable constitutional rights. And what really just gets my goat is the knowledge that that steals our sacred right to self-government. Because it means that corporate lawyers can go into court and argue in an attempt to overturn any democratically enacted law. It means that we can lose environmental protection laws because lawyers convince judges that they somehow violate constitutional rights. And that's not a jury question, by the way. That's what the judges do. Corporate lawyers can go in and overturn public health and public safety laws because it somehow violates a corporation's constitutional right. Corporate lawyers can overturn campaign finance laws. They won't even let us protect the integrity of our own elections against these corporations because they say it's violating the free speech rights of a corporation. Say what? Right? Which leads me to this. Give me one. Give me one of those, right? You're not crazy, sister. They are. It's maddening, isn't it? Which is why I like to look to our brothers and sisters in the global south, because when they're confronted with the craziness of it all, they have 2 words. Ya basta. It means enough already. That's enough. It's crazy, and it's crazy making. And further, folks, corporate constitutional rights not only steals our sacred right to self-government, it allows corporate lawyers to legitimize the theft. to tell us not only have we stolen your American heritage, but it's legal. And all you can do is put up with it. And you can come over here and fuss over in the corner where it doesn't really matter, because the law is on their side. Ya basta. Enough already. It's time for us to do what other people have done before us, and that's to educate, to organize, to agitate. It's time for us to tell the truth to each other about the society that we're living in, and have the courage and the inspiration to imagine another world that is not sanctioned by the ruling elite. One that will change the politics, the economics, and the legal system. And I want to conclude with this concept: law follows culture. This problem that I've laid out for you, it's not merely a legal problem, it's a cultural problem, because we've been accepting it. Like the frog in the pot of water, where it's just proverbially being turned up and up and up. Well, for my way of thinking, water's hot enough. Time to jump out, right? Time to actually get into a new framework. And that's what Move to Amend is doing, friends. We are educating and agitating and organizing an entire group of people around what we already know. And that is that there's a small ruling elite who've stolen our government from us, who have stolen our culture and society from us, and we just going to take it back. That's all. Nothing personal. And And I will conclude with this before we open up for discussion. Remember at the beginning I said I was challenging you to challenge me. Is this a story that only progressives could hear? Or is this a story that actually cuts across ideology? Now let me tell you something. I've given this presentation at pool halls and bowling alleys. I've given this presentation at Occupy. I've given this presentation at Tea Party meetings. And you know what? At Occupy, I get laughs and I get applause. And at Tea Party rallies, I got laughs and applause. Now, the applause and laughter comes at totally different places. But it can come. The point I'm making is this. I'm not inviting Tea Party people into the leadership of Move to Amend. I'm saying I'm willing to engage in conversation with them, right? And let them go out and organize and educate their own constituency. Because this is not a Democratic or Republican Party ideal, right? This is an American ideal. And I think that that's actually the strength of Move to Amend. Yes, we are committed to an anti-racist, anti-oppression organizing system, and we're building a movement like that, and we're also in respectful dialogue with principled conservatives with whom we disagree. It's not one or the other. We can do both, right? Does that make sense? And so, my friends, I'm now, as I come to the end, going to invite you to make a comment, ask a question. I'm going to do a stack, so raise your hand and keep it up. 1, 2, 3, 4 in the pinks. Steve, you're 5. Sir, you're 6. 7, 8 in the green. 9. So we'll do those 10. We're going to do those 10. Y'all be short and I'll be short. But before we go, I got to ask you. You're already on. Ruth, what did I charge you to come here today?
Nothing.
Nothing. Kenneth, what did I charge you?
Nothing.
Nothing. Folks, it's my standard fee. Nothing. However, I do like to eat. And traveling across the country, not only for myself, but my colleagues who are also out on the road, costs money. So, if this were Texas, there wouldn't be a man without a hat on his head. What happened? There's a hat. Sir, could I use this hat? Could I get another hat over for this side too? Because I'm going to do an old-fashioned pass the hat. Keep one on this side and one on this side. And as this comes around... Okay, well we'll pass. If you are moved to make a donation, please do. If you don't want to, that's okay. You don't have to. But if you're going to write a check... Move to Amend. And get this. If you are so moved afterwards to make a contribution on a credit card, look how slick I am. I got this little number. So for anybody, if you want to and are willing and able to do that, please do. And as this comes around, these hats, here is our brochure. If you want one, take it. If you already have one, don't. But take that, pass it around. Here also is the convergence information. Remember that it's September 6th through 8. We had to change it because our colleagues in Charlotte couldn't accommodate us, so September 6th through the 8th. And the last thing is, I'm going to leave these with Ruth. You can buy more of these, but if you really want one, come get one from Ruth to show you. Keep that on one side. We got two going. Yes. Yeah, there's no reason to scowl. Yes, we can use a microphone for the question. So can we get a microphone for the question?
What is it, Dave?
September 6th through 8th. Oh yeah, who we go? Number 1. So y'all, since we're giving you a microphone, please have the courtesy to be brief and not speechify so we can move along.
My question is, I know that a lot of people understood from the Citizens United decision that corporations were people and speech was money was speech. But it's my understanding that corporations have been persons for a really long time. And how did that happen?
So the short answer, so how did it happen that corporations could claim constitutional rights? Look at the back where the local organizers, and by the way, if you're a local organizer with the actual move to men, would you raise your hand or stand up or something? Can we get a round of applause for these people? This who's number 2? Let's keep this going. It's right here. So look on the back at the chart. What you will see is case after case after case where that goes. You go grab that back so that there's some confusion with the donation card. I'll watch that. But if you look, there are case after case after case where judges have said, oh, this law violates a corporation's First Amendment rights, our Fifth Amendment rights, our 14th Amendment rights. It's not just one decision. It's a legal doctrine at play. And this legal doctrine is what we are addressing with the constitutional amendment. 100 years ago for corporate personhood and 25 years ago for money is speech. That case is actually known as Buckley versus Vallejo, brought to us by the Powell Court, actually in 1974. So, Citizens United took corporate personhood and money is speech and merged them together. So, that's the short answer. Number 2.
Yeah, the ability to pass an amendment has to go through each state legislature, is that correct?
Ultimately.
And if they're all pretty much corrupt and bought out by the corporations, how do they get an amendment through state legislature?
So the question is, like, this is an organizer's question, like going to the end result. I want to be clear, friend, that the Congress that's going to propose this amendment, or the state legislatures that's going to either propose the convention or ratify, either way, are not the people who are in office now. I want to be clear that we're looking at a, I think, 10 to 15 year struggle. By that I mean a 10 to 15 year campaign to change our culture. And that, there's, like, if anybody can actually articulate a way to change law, politics, and culture in less time, I promise you I'm eager to hear what your plan is. But what I have done is, you can get on the stack as soon as we do these 10. Because I'm telling you, I've looked at social movements, and laws don't happen unless there are people in motion. Broad, deep, educated, militant people who are willing to put their bodies on the line. And honestly, sir, we're not there yet. But may I just ask, if you have participated in Moral Mondays and been arrested, would you please stand up for a moment so that we can give you a round of applause? To us what it takes to actually be serious, because it's not just an intellectual exercise. I have in fact done workshops weekend long. I've actually taught a course at a university on this, and it's all very interesting. But at the end of it, if somebody is not willing to say, you know what, I see myself in that, and I'm willing to do what Elizabeth Cady Stanton did, or I'm willing to do what Big Bill Haywood did, or I'm willing to do what John Brown did, or I'm willing to do what the champions of justice did, which was to put their body on the line, to pledge, as the founders did, their sacred honor, and actually commit themselves, then this is just an interesting intellectual conversation. But as soon as we start to see ourselves as part of a narrative that can actually win power, that's when we have a movement on our hands, and this movement is just beginning. Because I want to point out something, folks. We have a full house here at this library. Now look at each other for just a moment. Just look around. You're all freaks. What are you doing here? I'm not famous. Ain't nobody heard of me. Well, Steve has. Almost nobody here has actually heard of me. But that's actually the good news. The fact that you're not coming to hear a celebrity, you come here because you heard about some movement to abolish corporate personhood, and you know that needs to be done, and you want to get involved with it. Something is happening that has not happened in my adult lifetime, and that's a serious movement for power is being formed all around us. You feel it too, right? It's not just me, right? Something is happening. Who's number 3? Yes, sir.
Okay, I'm Dick Warren, and I'm a little bit afraid. I'm not as afraid as a lot of people because I got a little more money than a lot of people. But I'm afraid. And I think a lot of people in this room experience that same kind of fear. My son-in-law got a hell of a good job, $150,000 a year job with a corporation. Okay? I've got another son, that is making a lot of money. These people are hinged to this corporate thing. And, they say, how can you be that way? How can you have this kind of attitude? And what, folks, the thing of it is, we've got to overcome our fear. Because we are afraid of change. We're afraid that what we're doing right now might bring some fear to us, might bring some unpleasant activities for us. And that's what I think slows down things and keeps things from happening. Thank you.
I guess I'll do this. Who's number 4? Right over here in the pink. As the microphone goes around, thank you for that comment, and I'm going to tell you this. My spiritual practice tells me there are 2 great motivators for human beings. Fear and love. And I think that when we find the love for ourselves and the love for not only our own family, but for humanity, and when we're really expansive, the love for life itself and the forest and the rivers and the streams and our connection to it, that will make that fear, it'll subside a little bit. But the last thing I want to remind you, friends, is courage is not the absence of fear. It's overcoming our fears. So own the fact that you're afraid, just like you own the fact that you're righteously angry, and then move through it. Who's number 4?
I am. My name is Sandy Ulrich, and I just want to make a comment that I understand why people are afraid. I came through that era as a fairly young pregnant woman when Kennedy was assassinated, and then Bobby was assassinated. That whole deal, and everything was hushed up. We still don't know to this day how that all happened, of course. So that burns on my memory. I just really feel that Patrick Henry, I remember I wasn't there, but Patrick Henry said, give me liberty or give me death. So how can we protect ourselves from being killed if we become extremely vocal? I used to be very vocal, and today I'm a little more timid about it.
Well, I guess what I would say is this. I am a firm believer that we have to recognize that in this society, this culture, the state has more access for surveillance, more ability for violence than has ever happened in the history of humanity. So you know where I've decided to hide? Right out in the open. As loud as I can possibly be. Right? Because if they ever come to me, I want all to know it. And it's worth pointing out that yes, look, the reason that the Obama administration is trying to prosecute Bradley Manning for just telling the truth, the reason that the administration is going after Snowden is to make an example out of just old-fashioned whistleblowers. Right? Because they are afraid. Right? They are afraid of us. And I want to be clear. they're not afraid of our guns to the right wing. I mean, look, I own a shotgun and I own a pistol. I'm from Texas. They're pretty much like issued to you at 16. But nobody in government is afraid of my shotgun that I got when my papa died. I inherited it from him. And you know what? I'm going to hold on to that. That means a lot to me, that double-barrel shotgun. It's an over and under. But ain't nobody scared of that gun. What they're scared of is the fact that a bunch of us might get together and start telling the truth to each other and start to actually build a movement where we actually say, you know what, this is foolishness. We're not going to participate. Because let me tell you something. The most powerful act that we can do, there is a symbol for it in organized labor. Y'all ready? It goes like this. You know what that means? No. Strike. We're not making it happen anymore. The reality is this, friends. Yeah, right? Here's the thing. This entire society works because we collectively make it work. We are told that the corporations create wealth. That's a lie. Only human labor and work can create wealth. Concentrate wealth and power and decision making. And it goes deeper than this. We're told that corporations create jobs. Another lie. The Fortune 500 has actually lost more jobs in the last 20 years. Oh, and by the way, not lost as in, oops, where did they go? As in intentional, deliberate policies to ship them overseas. Right? The only reason this economy is still functioning at all is because of local-owned, independently operated businesses and commerce and small independent corporations. Again, I'm not against corporations, but these huge transnational corporations that do not have any sense of commitment to the community or even to the nation of the United States of America, it's time for us to rein them in, folks. They've become like a Frankenstein monster that's turned on us. And it's just not just our right, it's our duty to rein them in. Number 5.
Hey David, it's good to see you. And your speech has gotten a lot better since I asked you to speak at the law school about 15 years ago.
I had more hair then, but so did you.
That's right. I guess my question is kind of two different ones, but locally, I know you guys have been pushing for local referenda, city councils, and county boards to say we are against the idea of corporate personhood. Is that something we can do here locally? And my second question is sort of a historical one. You or someone else, I'd be interested to hear about some of the history of the Equal Rights Amendment, and that came 3 states short of being ratified, and that's interesting to see how we can do this.
Such great questions, and I want to say, folks, that Steve Agan is a dear personal friend, and so to see him in the crowd makes me a little emotional. So it's good to see you, brother. I love you, and I'm so glad that you're here.
Can I answer his first question?
Sure.
Local.
Please.
The city of Asheville, is this us? The city of Asheville did pass a resolution 2 years ago at our request. And out in the western part of the state, we have several communities that have passed resolutions. 2 of our legislators, or several of our legislators, submitted a resolution to the North Carolina legislature 2 years ago, and that got bottled up in committee.
How about that? So this is our process, but the thing is, Steve, like, you wouldn't know this if you were just watching the corporate media. But I just want to say, very quickly, and I'll get to the second part of your question, but in 2010, Move to Amend did not even exist. Today, we just went over 301,100 people and growing. So is there anybody here who is not yet signed up to join the local Move to Amend effort? So we got a couple of hands. Can we get a clipboard and like y'all need to join, right? You ready now that you've heard it? You want to get involved? All right, so get one back there. Not only that, Steve, We have 150 local affiliates, that is, local groups that are actually growing and involved, and that number is growing. And we've helped over 500 communities pass those resolutions in support. But get this, those resolutions, most people don't even know it when a city council does this. We've also used the citizens initiative process to put it on the ballot in 28 different jurisdictions so that voters get to vote on whether you think that we should have a constitutional amendment to abolish local personhood and get money out of elections. Out of 28 jurisdictions, including in places where Republicans outnumber Democrats, where conservatives outnumber liberals, including in the state of Montana, we put it on the ballot in 28 jurisdictions as big as an entire state. Guess how many times we've won? 28. And we haven't lost a single one. And 16 states are calling for a constitutional amendment. So that by every objective measurement, Steve, this movement is getting larger, stronger, and better organized. Now I'm going to take you directly to the equal rights struggle and tell you that my mama worked on the Equal Rights Amendment, and she will someday say, I'm so sad becoming painfully close to winning. And actually, it was just a couple of states, a couple of votes in each one of those states, right? If you look at them, there were some states that were only like 2-3 legislatures. So less than 10 individual votes from amending the Constitution. But other days, my mama, the same woman, will get out of bed and say, I'm so glad we won that struggle. Now let me ask you something. Is my mama schizophrenic? Of course not. It's all in the frame. Because it is true that the constitutional amendment was not won. But by engaging in the political struggle with that level of clarity, she and other women and some men, but it was mostly women, changed the culture of this country. Gender roles, right? We've still got work to do. But would any woman who was like an adult 25 years ago make the argument that you're living in the same world as you did 25, 30 years ago? Culture changes, Steve, because people, ordinary people, put their shoulder to the wheel. When enough people think that something is true, when enough people act like it's true, it's true. That's the point. I think that the Equal Rights Amendment struggle is instructive, and I also think it's worth pointing out that we need to learn that those women, and the male supporters, but mostly women, did grassroots organizing. They actually did educational forums. They didn't spend all their time in the halls of Congress or even in state legislatures. There had been about 10 to 15 years of concentrated work with one another. In fact, after reading Betty Friedan, what did she write? The Feminine Mystique. And in that book, all Betty Friedan said was, you know, I have everything that my society tells me I should want, and I'm miserable. And she wrote a book. I don't think she thought she was going to launch second wave feminism. I think that she was just explaining her lived experience. But I think that other women read it and said, oh my goodness, me too. And daughters told their mothers, and aunts told their nieces, and women started to get together in what we now know as consciousness-raising groups.
Move to amend consciousness-raising groups.
With all due respect, I submit this to you. This hour and a half we've spent is consciousness-raising. Now, here's the other kicker. I don't know whether this time is organizing or just interesting entertainment.
It's inspiration.
Well, I'm glad it's inspiration, and I'm glad it's inspiring, but you will decide if this is organizing after I leave. Because I don't live here. Y'all do. And whether you stay involved in an ongoing basis with Kenneth, and with Ruth, and with others in the move to amend, then it won't be organizing unless and until you do. I'm going to finish this stack, ma'am, and then I'll come back to you, I promise, okay? Hold on. Well, you know what? Can you do it in 30 seconds?
Yes.
Stand up.
Here's a new corporation just being formed, and Roberta Madden in Black Mountain, and Nancy Milwaukee. There's Roberta Madden right there, and she'll tell you about it.
Come talk to me, Roberta. I'd like to hear about it. Or can you do it in 30 seconds? Because we got a stack. 30 seconds.
It's called Ratify ERA-NC. Ratify ERA-NC. Our concentration now is with the Congress. We're trying to get 2 joint resolutions passed, one in the House and one in the Senate, to eliminate the deadline and require that we need only 3 more states.
By the way, you know, what's your first name now?
Roberta?
Roberta, that's actually a brilliant legal strategy because that imposition is not required under the Constitution. Congress imposed it, Congress can release it. And if that were the case, then we're just 3 states away. Everybody knows that, right?
That's right.
And anybody know when the 27th Amendment, which was the last amendment ratified, when it was introduced?
203 years to get all the way through.
200 some odd years. Just saying. Number 6. Who's number 6? Yes, sir. Wait for the microphone so everybody can hear.
Where are the young people, and what do you hear when you talk to them?
Okay, I'm glad you asked the question. Where are the young people? I'm gonna look around and acknowledge that we're mostly white, and I at 50 make myself like I seem young in this crowd. So let's just acknowledge that, but also not to fuss about it, because I want to tell you this. It depends on who has invited me to come, is what the crowd looks like. Because I also have gone to Occupy encampments where at 50 I was clearly the elder in the group. I have also been invited to come onto college campuses, and when I'm on a college campus, most of the people in attendance, guess what, are 19 to 25, right? So all I'm getting at is that groups form around the people that we know and we're comfortable with. Part of what we are doing at Move to Mend is giving people tools to do work across generations, across race, because let's also acknowledge we're mostly white in this crowd. And again, I've been invited to black churches, and I'm often one of the only white people in the black churches. Could y'all see me? Has anybody been to a black church? Y'all think that this would go over?
Yeah.
Listen, actually, they think I'm too passive. They think I'm not willing to go fast enough or far enough. All I'm getting at, sir, is that we do talk to young people at Move to Mend, and we're trying to help our local organizers with the tools, and we call it an anti-oppressive framework, to give them the tools and the language that young people and people of color will feel comfortable with. And I hope that this is something that is a tool that people will take up. Now, when I'm with young people,
What do you hear?
what I hear is, you're not going far enough and you're not going fast enough.
Good.
So for everybody who thinks that Move to Amend is too radical, no young person that I'm involved with in the movement thinks that. They think, actually, we need to rewrite the whole document. They say, we need a whole new thing. So all I'm telling you is that somewhere in between that is a sweet spot. Number 7. Y'all remember your number, or my trick won't work? 20. Well, he's not. He'll remember.
So I think I have a proposal of sustained action that brings that culture and law together, and I think it warrants a point of order bonus. A point of order being, what are we going to be doing in North Carolina to further this besides the convergence, and what's the actual process in North Carolina? And then my proposal for sustained action is to humbly dress up as the Grim Reaper. I've got the outfit.
Keep going. I'm loving this.
I'm tweaking some organizing and some research on my whole political philosophy and how to do it. But I need, first off, I need the process of revoking corporate charters, and I've researched that process some already, and I know my goal is to dress up as the Grim Reaper and stand in front of Bank of America on the sidewalk and Wells Fargo, and somewhere maybe Monsanto's on the list and Duke Energy's on the list. Walmart, if we can ever get past the jobs debate, which government could provide. And but my point is, I've researched that the Secretary of State has some power in this, but it's mainly for dues for revoking the corporate charter.
No, that's wrong. I'm happy to tell you, actually, there's a lot more power. The political power to revoke the corporate charter or revoke the certificate of authority to do business exists in North Carolina law right now. We do not have the political power to utilize those tools, but the tools exist.
So how are we doing?
So listen, here's the thing. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but I just want to let you know that actually this tactic that you're describing is one that we encourage. And we encourage both the creative political theater you're describing and do it in an organizing way. So imagine, what's your first name, sir?
Brian, with an I.
Brian with an I. Let's imagine Brian with an I and a couple of other people doing political theater, and then others passing out clipboards and informational brackets, and we're bringing the movement bigger and bigger and bigger. And now let me tell, are you through, or did you want to finish? I didn't want to interrupt you.
Well, yeah, I do. I know that the legislature has some, involvement or a lot of power in doing it, which I don't have much faith in. But I know that the Attorney General has power in it too, and I have more faith in the Attorney General and the Secretary of State because they align with my party interests and they're somewhat critical of the business interests in general. So I'm wondering, I need a petition so people can I'm gonna have signs to follow me on the web and to petition and other people to dress up as the Grim Reaper as well. It's not just I'm the head Reaper. It's you're all Reapers.
Listen, here's the thing. I love this idea, and what is underlying it all is that there is no shortage of creative tactics to engage people in political education and theater, because I'm going to take that one and just toss out a couple of things that people have already done. In San Rafael, California, a Move to Men supporter was arrested for driving alone in a high occupancy vehicle lane. But he took it to court and he got huge media attention because he said, "Judge, there were 2 people in the car. Here's the corporate charter that I was driving the car." Seattle, Washington, Move to Men person. And I feel sorry for the clerk who actually was not paying close enough attention. It was a woman, Move to Men supporter. She went in and got an application for marriage to, and I forget exactly what it was, but James Roberts, Incorporated. An actual corporation owned by a fella who had incorporated his own name, and she wasn't really paying attention and just saw James Roberts, right? It's said, "Oh, well, wonderful. There's James Roberts' signature. Here's your marriage certificate." Took that marriage certificate, she did, to a Unitarian Universalist minister who went to the King County Courthouse steps. Somebody dressed up in a corporate person costume, performed the ceremony. She marched in and filed it, and then the King County executive had to issue an annulment. And she, every step of the way, said, "Look, the men that I'm meeting are just bunk. I'm so glad the corporation expanded my field." So all I'm getting at is that there are creative and clever ways, right? I think the Grim Reaper is brilliant. If you write that up and put it on, send it to info@move2men and flesh it out, we'll make that available to others to do. And at the end of the day, every single thing that we're describing is possible if and only if we have built the political power to be able to allow elected officials to do what needs to be done. You were 7, right? 7. Yes. 8. Thank you.
So when I was growing up little in the 60s, I was asked every single day at dinner, "What did you do for your country today?" And it could have been, I got a good grade. Everything I was doing that was good was for the betterment of my country. And during that time, we thought of our government as the representation of the best of what we could do. And it passed civil rights legislation, and we had anti-poverty laws and things like that. Well, then along came Reagan. And maybe it happened before then, maybe I was just naive, but it seemed like that was when government was turned into our enemy, and people were convinced that government was their enemy. And I think that's kind of the other half of this, is that the corporation has kind of taken over government, and yet before that happened, we were convinced that government was our enemy, and I can't figure out how we can convince people to see government again as representing the best of us, because the only people going into government are these, you know, greedy corporate bastards. I mean, with few exceptions. Sorry. But I think we should take government back and make it what it could be, not just, you know, what it is right now. I'm not even sure what my question is.
No, what I heard, ma'am, was a heartfelt appeal that was based on the same thing that I started this with. I remember, we're probably more or less the same age, of a similar generation, right? And I do remember being a proud American. You know what's really funny, though, is at least in the young activists that I meet, they never had that.
Because they were Reagan.
So I would say this. I don't want to vilify Reagan or deify Clinton. I want to say this. That there has been, you are correct, that there was a cultural effort to vilify government. And part of what I do with this story is to try to reclaim the idea that we the people are government. And if you'll notice, see, I will tell you this. The story that I was told as a child is basically a creation myth. Because the reality is that only 5% of the rich white men were actually part of government to begin with, right? So, where I'm from, I think y'all say it too, don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I think there's a beautiful baby in this story, but their bathwater is called racism and white supremacy, and it's foul. And we've got to actually come to terms with the fact that a culture that's based on exploitation and oppression and white supremacy and patriarchy, these are things that we have to be willing to deconstruct. And I know that for many people those words are jargony, but they're just words that I'm using to try to explain the concepts of exploitation and oppression. I'm willing to engage with other words, ma'am, but at the end of the day, I tell you this. I can take myself and my story into any pool hall or bowling alley in this community. You can't take me someplace where I can't basically talk about liberty and justice and equality and what this country is supposed to stand for and not find some common ground. And that common ground is hard work. And so I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to go into the black barbershops and the black churches and engage those folks. Because honestly, for me, it is much more important that we build a multiracial movement, that we recognize, not just because it's the ethical and moral thing to do, which it most certainly is, but even more because actually, look at the demographics and the objective numbers. If we want to be on the right side of any movement, we got to be working with people of color. We got to be working with the new immigrants, and I will never again call any human being illegal. Right? But the right wing, and I don't mean Republicans, I mean the corporatists, right? That they are using to try to confuse us. And so I think this is a long, because I'm not sure if I'm even answering your plea, but you know, it's like, I guess I'm like, I feel you, sister. I feel you. And what I know is this. There's a way to cut to the chase. The truth is recognizable. Again, I just want, like, look, almost nobody's left here, right? It's 2 hours we've been at this, and everybody is still here because we're hungry for this change. You know, I'm telling you that this must be what the feminist movement felt like in the early days. This must be what the trade union movement felt like. This must be what the abolitionist movement felt like. I mean, I'm telling you, there is something going on that has not gone on in my adult lifetime. You feel it too, right? I mean, like, I'm serious. I feel like a blind dog in a meat locker. Think about it for a moment. I'm blind, so I smell the meat. But my whole lived experience has said, when you smell meat, put your nose to the ground and sniff, because you'll find the meat somewhere on the ground. Well, the meat locker, what do you do with the meat? You hang it up. The point is this. We have not figured out yet the out-of-the-box new paradigm leap, but we will. And I'm going to tell you something, and this is back to your question, sir. That answer, that new paradigm, is almost surely going to come from a young person, and if science tells us anything, it'll probably be a young woman. I'm just saying, like, that's actually the truth, right? That's the truth. So I say we going to keep telling the truth as we see it and continue to try new things. Thank you for the Grim Reaper idea. Write it up. You got an assignment now. Who's number 8? 9. I'm sorry, number 9.
No, I'm not number 9. I want to get on the stack, though.
Okay, we'll do another round. I see you.
Yeah.
We'll do another one.
Five people that they can talk about being mad. We've been to Raleigh 3 times. The last time we had a legislator in front of us answering questions, and one point he made just infuriated me. And it was simply this, when we were talking about all the issues. He said, "It's now our turn."
Yes.
Yeah, well, that ain't going to last long. Who's number 9? You got 10, number 10, and then we'll do another round. Yes, sir. I think we ended at 10, and we're supposed to be out here at 7:30, so we will do that. We're going to end this discussion at 7:30.
First, a comment on getting city council and stuff to do resolutions to move to amend. I want you to know we tried to find Anderson bill and the city council has refused to consider it.
I'm going to just say real quick, you need to do city council. That's easy. All right.
But we're not finished. But my comment relates to the American Anti-Corruption Act. I'd like to comment on it. When I looked at it, I like the strategy, and I particularly like the board of advisors of 23 people that I don't think could agree on anything except probably move to amend and the corporate and the anti-corruption act itself. Could you comment on that, please?
Yeah, I mean, the Anti-Corruption Act is an effort to actually take the what is allowed to be done under existing law and to push existing law as far as it can. So we don't oppose it at Move to Amend, but we don't think it goes nearly far enough. So we're just not putting our organizing energy to it. But we're not opposing it either. So if you or others want to work on that, I think that it would make marginal improvements. Absolutely. So let's do one more round. 1, I saw you 2, 3, 4. Avery, you'll be 5. So we're going to do those 5, and then we'll close it out. Number 1.
I know I'm preaching to the choir. I've spent my life doing that, and I over and over simply hate to do something, anything, that I can say, I did that, and it made a difference. The only little thing I've been able to do was to take my money from BB&T and put it into telco. But I think that is something that if everybody in this room
is something you can definitely do. I totally agree. And again, it is a necessary but not sufficient condition. So yes, start there and keep going. Number 2.
I just want to say that I think always for every problem there is an elegant solution. This could be it. Over at UNCA there are blocks around the campus with important quotes. And one of them goes something like, some people miss opportunity because it wears overalls and it looks like work. And that's a quote from Thomas Edison, and I just think that inspires me. And then I have a question. If we go to movetoamend.org, can we make contributions online?
Yes, you most certainly may. And remember, for those of you who are able or willing to make a credit card donation, I still have that for the machine. Number 3. Yes, sir.
I'm Alan Lomax with the Silva Move to Amend affiliate. We hold record for the most resolutions in the state. We want to challenge Asheville to take that over. In the southeast, they're much bigger. We do have a suggestion for activism. We have a member who is a mental health worker, and he is.
We can't hear you.
Yeah, y'all, let's please be respectful. Thank you.
We have a member of our affiliate who is a mental health worker, and he is working on an activist plan. Being that corporations are people, they need to be held accountable as people, and being that they are acting as insane people who are not who are an endangerment to themselves and to other people. He has approached the magistrate of the McLaurin County to commit Bank of America since they're
expose the ridiculousness of corporate personhood and constitutional rights. Who's number 4? Yes, ma'am, in the back.
I just want to say I've signed a number of Georgia Amendment petitions online, but I think it's important that we know that many years ago, Senator Frank Church, when I was at a meeting with him out in Cleveland, and this is before we had computers, said that for every phone call they get, they know there are 1,000 people who think that way and won't bother to let them know. And I'm saying this because signing petitions is fine, but they're looked at by legislators as coming from the one source that submits those petitions. And it's really important when things are going on in Congress and in our legislature that you individually pick up the telephone or send an email and express what you need to say, because it really makes a difference. I have changed Tom Apodaca's vote way back when the whole idea of increasing the minimum wage, he swore he wouldn't do it. And I got him to change that vote because I got the members of the Henderson County League of Women Voters and be notified less than 24 hours before the vote was being taken. And I notified them with his phone number and his email. And he voted for that increase. And when the paper said, "Why did you do that?" he said, "I just got so many phone calls and emails I had to." And I don't think he got probably more than 50 of them. So keep that in mind when something is coming up and you really care about the issue, do something about it.
So I'm going to use that, thank you for that comment, and just tell you what the great Texas politician Sam Rayburn once said. I'm from Texas originally. Sam Rayburn said, "As an elected official, when I feel the heat, I always see the light." And I think that part of our problem is that we haven't been generating sufficient heat these days as citizens. Who's number 5? Abram, you're up.
Yeah, David mentioned earlier that 16 states have already passed resolutions petitioning Congress for a constitutional amendment on corporate personhood. Well, some of you may know, but some of you may not know that we have several, quite a large group of legislators in North Carolina, very brave legislators in North Carolina, who have introduced resolutions in the North Carolina General Assembly, in both the House and the Senate, both in last session and this General Assembly session. And that is live legislation that we all need to write to our legislators and tell them to support. You know, it's sort of, people lose hope. They think, well, because of the makeup of the General Assembly, it's just a waste of time to support those resolutions. It's not a waste of time. You know, we need to show support for the legislators who are willing to put themselves on the line by introducing this legislation in North Carolina. And so please do that. Does anybody have the number of the bills handy? I didn't bring them with me. But we'll look that up and put it on the website. It's important to write legislators and tell them to support the resolutions opposing corporate personhood in North Carolina.
Well, thanks for that. And now, folks, I do want to say again, if anybody is able and willing to make a credit card donation, I'll stick around. I'll also stick around if we've got time. I know that there are usually people who are either quiet or shy or otherwise just don't like to make public comments. I'll invite you to come up and chat with me if you want. I'll also want to conclude, did you need to say something, or did you grab the microphone for that?
I want to say something.
All right, go ahead.
There's an affiliate here in Asheville. We're the people that put on this event tonight. When David says that you can donate to Move to Amend, you can do it on the internet, you can do it with him tonight. But none of that money goes to this affiliate. So I'm saying if you'd like to support this group, pay for a room like this, pay for some of the flyers and posters and that sort of thing. And we're in the process of building some really interesting puppet faces, not full puppet faces out of paper mache that we're going to parade around in Belshare, getting people to sign the petition. So we'd like you to support Move to Amend National. We'd like for you to support Move to Amend Asheville.
Thank you very much. And so thank you for coming out.